Okay. We'll talk a little bit about some of the architectures and some of the high availability stuff, and then we'll move into source to image and some of my demo stuff. Oops, I went too far. So this is pretty much the most simple setup you can run and get it working. You'll run one master, which has all the things we talked about, your authentication, replication controller, scheduler. You could run some of your data storage on it. You'll have one infrastructure node, so that has the router, your registry, and those pieces. So that's where, like we talked about earlier, you point your DNS towards that one, and that would direct things from there into the actual nodes. And then you'd run a couple of nodes with whatever percentage of storage you wanted to. And this would get you up and going. You'd be able to start doing stuff, but you'd have no high availability. If your master dies off, your nodes will actually stay up, but as soon as something needs to be rescheduled, then they won't work anymore, and those type of things. So we recommend a little bit more than that once you get to where you're actually using it for your full-on enterprise processes and things like that. So here's where we talked about just high availability for apps. So here's where you do something like spin it up to 2 infrastructure nodes and then load balance across those with either an external load balancer or something else you have set up in there that's your own hardware or whatever you want to use for a load balancer. Because you're running multiple registries there for high availability, you're going to need to have some sort of persistent storage for those registries to hook into. Otherwise, obviously, they're not going to be able to be in the same state and all of that. So that's another thing you kind of have to add on when you move to multiple infrastructure nodes. But at this point, we haven't spun up our master to any more yet. So we're really only high availability for the apps, and anything you're doing on the development side, your replication controller drops out, those type of things can still trickle down and cause effects on your apps eventually. But it's more going to affect your internal processes for development. So then we look at going to this more, which is your 3 masters, which is a requirement of the SED. Put another load balancer in front of those. And at this point, you're pretty much full on high availability across everything with 3 masters and multiple infra nodes. And most of the people or most of the clients I've heard about that have decided to go full on with Openshift, just go straight in for this and set it all up and do it full high availability across everything to make sure that nothing drops out. And then once you have this going and you start getting everything in there, then you start just adding nodes. So you can add, there's not really limitations on nodes. There's some internal subnets that are used automatically, and the default one is just /16. So you'll only be able to run 256 unless you modify the default configuration. But 256 or 255 is still a lot of nodes. And you can modify that as long as you do it the very first time you install Openshift. And you can make those subnets as large as you want to run, theoretically, as many subnodes as you're interested in running. So those are the 3 basic architectures we normally go through. Anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? That's pretty basic stuff, I'm sure, for everybody. Cool. All right, we'll talk a little bit about source to image, and then I'll go into some demos, and we'll actually look at Openshift and some of the stuff some of the demo stuff I have.
How much memory resources and CPU resources does it take to run the cluster you showed? Minimum specs.
There is a list of minimum specs somewhere. I don't know them off the top of my head. I think what I have set up is all of my compute nodes have 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I think my master nodes are running on 8, and my infra nodes are running on 8. So, and it's not particularly super fast, to be honest, with those type of specs. So you're going to probably want to go up higher than that, but that's more than enough to get it running and operational and be able to run quite a handful of projects. So, got it.
Your requirement.
There we go. Masters require 2 virtual CPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM, and nodes require 1 virtual CPU and 8 gigabytes of RAM. And yep, so that's about. I was pretty close. So, Okay, let's talk a little bit about source image and some of the stuff going on there. So source image is a cool feature that OpenShift 3 has where basically you hook up a Git repository with your code in it. You point to the image you want to use from your Docker registry. It will automatically put those together and deploy it straight out, so you don't have to do anything. One of the really cool things, I have a little bit more of a development background, so I like doing some of these type of things, and why I chose the demos I did. When I first saw it, the idea of hooking in with webhooks on your GitHub is really cool. So you webhook into your application project on the node, it'll push out, and as soon as you make a commit to your repository that's accepted, it will notify your cluster. Your cluster will pull that down, rebuild your image with the base container from the registry, and redeploy it for you automatically. And you can set the deployment you want if you want to do like an A/B deployment, or a bunch of different deployment options out there. Rolling upgrades, base updates, and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to demo that here in a little bit. We'll see that in action. But I think this is a really cool feature that OpenShift has that makes it really, really versatile and good for development type of stuff.
Quick question about deployment strategies.
Sure.
How flexible is that? Do you pick from a list, or can you actually design your own?
You can design your own, but there is built-in A to B and rolling and one other one, I think, that are defined by default, and you can just select those when you set up your deployment configuration. But there is the option. All of these configurations are done in JSON and can be modified more or less to your own liking. So you can write your own deployment configuration as well if you have something in particular you want to do, and deploy that within your deployment configuration. Yeah, kind of talked this already, but so somebody develops some code, however they want to do it, push to your Git repository, OpenShift then accepts the binary deployment, or it can be integrated. Another thing I'll show, I have a Jenkins container set up in my cloud and have a build that goes through that. So you can hook into Jenkins that you run as a container in your OpenShift environment. You can hook into your external Jenkins, which is what we've seen a lot more of as shops are moving towards this. A lot of them already have an integrated CI/CD process that uses Jenkins or something like that for their build and test process. And you can totally hook OpenShift up to it and set up some API keys and have it interface directly with it from your external one. Or we have certified Jenkins containers that you can spin up in your OpenShift environment right there next to everything else on one of your other nodes and run internally as well. So once you have your code in there, you build it. It takes your source, your registry item container from whatever registry you have it hooked up to. Like we talked about earlier, it can be a Docker one, it can be the internal Red Hat one, pretty much anywhere that you want to point it towards. And it puts those together and builds the container that actually will run your code on the platform. And then it'll automatically deploy it out, like we talked about, using whichever deployment strategy you have set up. So if we want to go through some of that now, does anybody have any questions right now before we move on to some of the demo stuff? Anybody want to talk about anything? Nope. Okay, cool. Well, let's see here. Let's just switch over. I might have to switch Chromecasting to go to this one. How do I do that? If I stop and switch tabs, we'll maybe go back over. I don't want to keep having to do that though. I'll have to figure this out. So this is an environment that I have set up. It's running on Red Hat's IaaS platform, our OpenStack. So that's behind this. And then I have, like I talked about earlier, 3 masters, a couple infra nodes, and 4 nodes set up in here. And then I'm using Route 53 as my DNS to point to my infra nodes and make it available over the web. So this is one of the projects, but let's set up a new project here, and we'll do Git stuff. So I don't know how this is easy to do if I can't switch between tabs super fast, but let's see. We'll make a new project. I'm going to use an example image that's for Cake PHP that has, it's from the official OpenShift GitHub. as an example project. So we're going to use that. So here you can see all the images that are already in my internal registry that it pulled on installation. And I've already added this image that I want to use to the registry, so I didn't have to go pull it right now. But you can see by default, there's support for a lot of different stuff throughout here. And all these have supported stuff. And I believe just about all of them support source to image. So it'll actually go in and detect what type of code is in your Git repository that you pointed it to, and will try to pull and use the right container when it builds it for source to image. We talked a little bit about the limits earlier. This is where you can set some of those C group type limits. There's some more advanced limit stuff once we actually get the project going. So we'll look at some of that as well. I need to go and pull. I've already forked the cake PHP. You guys can't see this because it's not pulling up other tabs, but I've already forked the cake PHP repo to my GitHub, and that's where I'm going to do all the stuff for source to image. So, I want to use. This one has a MySQL database in the back end that's going to try to spin up automatically as
What do
well.
they call that? That context directory? Is that like an app root?
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what it is. So
Yeah.
like web root or something inside your app.
Yep. And I'm not actually going to hook up to the database or anything like that, so we're going to leave all that empty for now. So let's see if I can get to some logs. Well, here's the webhook over here. So I'm going to copy this. How do I switch tabs with this? There's got to be a way to do it.
You click the thing, it should say cast this tab, I think. If you actually click the
This?
Google, yeah.
Change the thing.
Just click cast, I think.
Switch. Good call.
Yeah.
So here's my GitHub repo where I said I already forked this from the main one. So we pulled that webhook URL that's going to try to hit. We could go right into here, into webhooks, and add a new webhook. So throw in this URL, do JSON, and I don't have any SSL set up for my own environment. And we'll add that. See, it was able to successfully hit it, so it'll successfully push. Next time there's commit, it'll push that data out to Openshift, and Openshift will do a deployment. Let's go back here and look at what's going on with this. I picked this cake PHP one because I had already imported into my internal registry. But yeah, so when you set it up, then you can choose one of these.
But it doesn't give you a
automatically
quick
deploy with
link to
that.
the Docker file from there.
No.
Okay. I like the guts.
Yeah, we can dig up some of that after this, absolutely.
What's a GUI?
Yeah.
Seriously.
All right, so this should be up now. So let's just make sure it is.
You configure the project from a repo file.
You can set up JSON templates that define the whole application, and then you just import that and do like an OC new app at your templated configuration file, and it'll spin it all up for you automatically from the command line. So yeah, a lot of the repos you'll find out there will be like, you can just OC new app straight to this template file in their GitHub repo, and it'll do a lot of this for you automatically. So you absolutely can do that. So nothing special here, but you can see it's up and running. This is what the example shows by default. So we'll see if I can switch tabs fast enough to actually show it redeploying here. So I'm going to go into here. We're back to my repo here, and I'm going to go view layouts, and we're going to change some of these here. So how can I do this the best? I think I'm going to end up causing 2 deployments, but oh well. I'm going to edit this and change this to I don't really want to, whatever. Go in here and change this one to the one that's actually being used. So now we may change. We go back over here and look at it in Openshift. It's already running multiple deployments because I made 2 commits, which probably wasn't the best, but oh well. As the deployments finish up, we'll be able to watch it spin down a pod and then spin up the new one as the new deployments are available.
That's from your webhook.
Yep, that's from the webhook. So
So
it just,
you go to settings and you see the ping and make sure.
yeah. So when you make the application here, it'll give you the webhook URL that it needs to hit. And then GitHub will detect automatically when there's a commit change and send a ping out to your OpenShift host to let it know there's a new commit available. It'll go grab it down. You can actually look at that as these are building.
One thing that's super nice about webhooks is you can replay them. You can examine their data all within it. You can see if it was picked up or not.
So you can see it checked out that there was a new commit, what was in the commit on my GitHub, and it pulled it down, and now it's grabbed the latest CakePHP example image and is put some new layers in there to build out the actual deployable container to put in the pod. Oops. Let's go back here. So as soon as this one finishes, then it'll actually spin down the other one and spin up a new one.
You know what it was using for that web terminal where someone spitting the log out?
I don't.
What?
Anybody else?
No. I'm not sure what it uses for
Did
that.
you really listen to them?
No, I like to stream logs.
Just like, oh, what is it?
All right, so there we go. Now you can see that it's finished with its build. So now it's ready to go ahead and move the pod over to the new build of it. And it's going to start spinning down the one, moving it over to the new pod.
What? Oh shoot.
As soon as that comes up, we'll go check out the webpage and it should look different.
Does it catch the layer changes on sequential builds?
There's different settings you can set up for how it handles if you're building sequentially and stuff like that. I am not super familiar with what options are available, to be honest. But you can see we changed what the default is.
Cancel.
Oh, sorry. You got to keep pointing out to me. I keep forgetting that it's not automatically switching tabs on me. So now, same URL. We have the new code that's been committed. That's the actual default page for this example. It shows, what you're running and all that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of how source to image works and how you can set up webhooks to do automatic deployments. You can do a lot of other cool stuff for automatic deployments. You can set it to hook into image changes from your registry. So if your base image changes, you can have it automatically pull the latest or pull the latest stable or however you label your stuff like that to have it automatically rebuild from there. And then you can set up more complicated pipelines as well, where you have like a dev cluster and a test cluster and a prod cluster and all of that, and have it promote images between those and then build out on each one for tests and things like that, and then promote them through there until you get all the way to production and you're ready to actually deploy it. So we'll take a little look at how some of that stuff might work by going to my Jenkins.
Okay.
So this is a Jenkins pod that's running inside of my OpenShift. It's not external or anything like that, and it's the default Jenkins 1. I think we have a certified Jenkins 2 image now in our registry.
What does the certification process get you? I mean, that it's certified to run an OpenShift and.
Yeah, so if you pull from the official, it's basically like all Red Hat products. What we provide is something that we know to run stably on our OSs and as secure as we can get it to at that state and time. So basically, it provides enterprise stability. We know these containers are going to run stably. They're not going to have stuff in there to automatically run as root. They're not going to have anything malicious in there. You know that these were created and reviewed and certified by somebody at Red Hat that said this container image is good and we can use it safely on Openshift.
So how long does that process usually take on new versions of it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I am not sure. I can look and see if I can
I was
find
just
out
kind
for
of
you.
wondering, like,
Yeah.
Sounds
I
like an
kinda wanna
obnoxious
just
job.
jump.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the
Disney
image
release,
services are doing the retroactive scanning. So like if there's a CVE on the OpenSSL library, they'll know that in the fingerprints and all images know that it's using that. Is that built into this registry?
It's not built into the internal registry. Okay. So once you pull from like Red Hat's, but Red Hat has gone through that whole process for anything they put in their certified registry.
Okay, so they get updated relatively quickly.
Yes. So yeah, those ones stay current and are updated frequently, and then you'll pull. You can set it up to automatically pull updates from the Red Hat registry into your local registry, but you don't have to set that up either if you want to use like a certain stable build that's good for whatever you're making.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of this really neat thing about containers is it makes it very easy to identify what's vulnerable.
Sure. Yep. And there's not a whole lot in there, so it's easy to tell. So here's Jenkins. I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably seen this before. I have a really basic pipeline set up in here that goes through a build, a deployment, and then just verifies that the endpoint is actually available. So we'll look a little bit about how that's configured just quickly and let it run through a build. So I set it up with the Groovy pipeline script. It's basically just broken into 4 little pieces here. There's the build stage. So it actually, you point to what namespace and application you're trying to build within OpenShift. Because I'm running Jenkins from within it, it'll use a special endpoint within the OpenShift deployment for internal services, this local cluster endpoint to do communications. There's a service account that's set up for Jenkins that has access to all these projects. And so that service account will go into the project, pull whatever it needs from it, tell it to build. It'll go through the build process. Once that's completed, it'll go through the deployment process to actually start it up. Once OpenShift says it should be successfully deployed, this test is pretty basic. It just checks the endpoint to make sure that the service is actually available now. But you can see how with this, you could do much more complicated stuff and build in all of your automated tests, everything like that, and have it automatically do this in OpenShift for you, basically. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of groups already have all of this developed, so it's easy for them just to point OpenShift to their external Jenkins and kind of marry them together, and you're all good to go. So we'll let this actually run quick, and then we'll look at one other short demo I have, and then I'll open it up to Mark if he wants to talk about something, or to the floor if anybody else wants to talk about anything. So
From your changes, then did that kick off 3 builds?
it kicked off 2 builds. Yes, because there's 2 commits. So it did build twice, and it only deployed the 3rd one because I have it set up to, if there are multiple builds in progress, wait till the last one's complete until it goes.
Or you can come up the back, but it should work.
So this is pretty boring, but we can go look at it over here.
Hey, do me a favor, come along back. We have a stairwell going down, so if you go to the, like, between, so, not the parking lot, on the other side.
It's Chris Reed's side.
So this is just a simple Node.js application. It doesn't really do much of anything. Display the page is okay, but you can see it's already kicked off a new build from Jenkins, and it's running through all of that. So it's hooked up to an external GitHub as well. It's pulling the source code from there, throwing it into the image, and it'll finish building. Then it'll deploy, and then it'll do the test to make sure it's actually available and up and going. Yeah. So the build completed. Now it's deploying the new pod, just like we saw earlier. So it automatically will spin that one up and do that for you. And then
Is pipeline one of the built-ins to Jenkins?
yes, those pipelines are built in, at least to this version of Jenkins, that's automatically deployable out there. I think Jenkins 2 has a lot more complicated stuff with it. But so you can see it finished, it built, it deployed, it ran its little check to make sure the service was available, and said we were good to go. So if we go back over here, and I'll just pull up the endpoint quick. There's nothing interesting on this page, but it gives an okay. So this successfully deployed and is running in a container out there.
We believe you.
All right, so that's the last kind of Git pipeline I have. I have one other cool little demo that shows kind of how scaling kind of works and bringing up a bunch of different containers and pods. I think it's a cool one to look at, but a lot of you may have seen it before because it was one of the keynote presentations for Openshift in the past at some of the Red Hat summits. But we'll go ahead and pull it up and take a look at it, and then we can open the floor to whoever else wants to talk. So I'm gonna cast this hex board. This basically this is, you could spin up a bunch of containers, and then as we spin up containers within this project, these will start to show as they're spinning up, as they go live, as they start responding, as we start adding containers. So I'm gonna go to the command line here because that's the easiest way for me to do this. So you guys aren't gonna be able to see it, but. So it's going to start scaling up a bunch of replicas, hopefully. Yeah, it is. Except for it's not showing them.
It's probably Chrome.
Come on. You can do it. Nope, can't, apparently. All right, well, maybe we won't be able to do this one because it's not actually showing it. I was going to show killing some pods and having it recover, but it's not being very pretty. We can look at it from here, but it's not going to be as cool to look at. So sorry, guys. So I already spun up 15 pods. They're all already up and running. But I will run a command to kill some, and we'll kind of watch as it fluctuates back and forth.
As you kill them and they try to come back up.
Yeah, the replication controller will automatically identify that not enough replicas are up and try to start some more up for us. So I'm going to kill the first 5 pods.
Hold on, I'm noticing it looks like you might have scaled up the wrong one.
No,
The one up top has
it's the right
route.
one. It's the right
okay.
one. Yeah. So, yep, I just killed 5 of them. So it's trying to spin up 5 more. It hasn't detected that the 5 were killed are fully gone yet. So as soon as it starts to fail more health checks, it'll actually close those out, but it knows that they're not really available right now, so it's spinning up more to make sure that 15 are actually available and running.
How do you configure the health check?
A lot of the images already have health checks built into them. You can write your own custom health checks, so you can do something as simple as just having a script that pings a heartbeat every once in a while or something like that. I think there's built-in support for some actual like probing heartbeat products, but I can't remember which ones they are.
Yeah, the ones I normally see are in your image. You'd say, hey, curl, send a git to this port.
So it does support.
If this says 200, then you're good. And when that, for as much as OpenShift cares, it's just going to say, is this sending, like, it'll have the actual pod curling the container within it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that gives like a 404, you might have like a timeout there.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, okay, you messed up, once. We're going to try again in 5 seconds.
Okay.
If you give me another 404, I'm shutting you down. And we're going to spin up somebody who will give you 200.
Right. I know that the health check directive is part of the new Docker format, like 113. But I don't know if they have it. So you're saying by saying it's an image, I think it's baked into the
Yeah, it's usually baked into it.
image.
To
Yeah.
each image though.
It was my understanding that it's part of the pod that does it. I could be wrong though.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, I know OpenShift is not running, On Docker 13, yeah.
Right.
and I know you can set them in the
The container part.
deployment config. Huh?
In the container part of the pod.
Yeah,
Because you define your pods in YAML or JSON.
Well,
and
it
your
does
pod
some
can have
stuff.
many containers within it, and then the container part of the YAML would have.
I don't know why the cool part is not
or
working.
Different
Okay.
types of
Configurable health checks there, not in the
different kinds
image.
of probes, yeah. Different kind of liveness probes, yeah. For each container.
Cool.
So, well, we start continuing to discuss. Mark, do you have something you wanted to go over? If anybody wants to go and throw stuff up in that hex and have it actually show up, you can hit this endpoint right here, and it brings up a little thing, and you can
we can't.
you can write stuff in it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Write it out for it.
Nope. No way. I can pull that off. But there's a URL, so if anybody wants to mess around with it, we can mess around with it after this, and it'll throw stuff in there, and they use it to give out prizes and stuff at Summit
When's the next summit?
this summer.
June.
Yeah.
So I don't have too much to add. That was an awesome job. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So if anyone has VBox installed, like I do on my Mac, the OC, the OpenShift client, the binary that is OpenShift, has got a cluster command. So you just OC cluster up, it will find VBox and make you an OpenShift deployment. That's kind of open. Like you can just log in with a system admin password. You can just log in as any user, any password. It's great for you. But it's a little local sandbox that just creates the images for you, or downloads the images, just loads them and runs them quickly in VirtualBox locally. It's easy enough to get started with if you want to just play around, being an admin, play around with the whole idea of working with OpenShift. I could show it to you, but it's not nearly as fancy as anything Matt did, so it's a little embarrassing.
It wasn't fancy at all. Don't say that.
I had a quick question on, let's say you have 4 nodes, just hardware nodes that you want to put OpenShift on. What's the recommended way to bootstrap it? Like today, would you use Ansible? Would you use? Are there how
So
would you bootstrap? I don't
Yeah.
want to do it in VirtualBox.
Oh, no.
in production.
I'm talking about local development,
Yeah.
just, sandbox kind of
Yeah.
thing.
yeah, there is an Ansible deployer. That's the advanced deployer for OpenShift.
Mhm.
You basically create a custom Etsy host file or Ansible host file
Mhm.
that has a whole bunch of configuration details, like you can turn on metrics and logging and a bunch of those things we have on there right from there.
Cool.
You'll define each of your nodes. I'll show you mine, but I can't put it up there because it's going to be on command line.
No, it's fine.
But I'll show you mine in a little bit. But yeah, basically, you create a specialized host file for Ansible, and then OpenShift comes deployed with Ansible. It will use that host file and configure and put everything out there for you and install it. So basically, as long as you have DNS connectivity for all of your nodes and RHEL installed on it,
Mhm. So you want to pre-bootstrap
yeah,
it with RHEL.
and your Ansible keys configured so that it has passwordless SSH sudo rights or root rights
Mhm.
for whenever it runs through the configuration to hit all the nodes.
Okay.
And then you'll run it from one of the masters. You'll run that playbook with the host file in it, and it'll go through and configure and install everything for you.
That's a recommended.
That's,
bootstrap.
yeah, if you're going to do anything that has even a little bit of advanced configuration in it, that's definitely the best way to do it. There is some automated scripts that'll do really basic deployments, but I've actually never used them. I went straight to the advanced one because to me, it was the easiest way to visualize what it was actually going to build out and what kind of options were available to you, and how you can kind of hook everything up. So you can pretty basically everything we talked about and everything you can think of that you would want to run an OpenShift, you can configure to that host file. So your authentication, your storage, your NFS stuff, whatever backend persistent stuff you want to use, your metrics, your logging.
Normalized inventory file.
Yep. Basically all of that. And then at the very bottom, you actually list out your nodes. And something we didn't really talk about, but that's kind of cool that you can figure in there is your selectors and your labels for your nodes. So that's one way you can control multi-tenancy and where things go is you can set labels on nodes. And then you tell the scheduler which labels are good for which products and things like that.
Mhm.
So you can say, I want my application only to run on nodes that are labeled as east or west or however, constraints. So basically everything in the hierarchy from containers to the project to your pods and stuff like that, you can set their own labels and selectors on them and control everything about them with selectors.
Yeah, like that's also depending on your cluster. That could also be like you deploy on AWS or deploy this on AWS, this on whatever other public cloud. I want this one specifically on-prem.
Right. And that was that multi-zoning too, even in different regions.
Yeah, and we've seen some people do some interesting stuff with it. Like the built-in Jenkins has the ability to actually do builds on a slave node. So people have set up a single node that's just for their builds. And so whenever Jenkins kicks off a build, it'll only build on that slave node that's designed specifically for builds, give that one a little bit extra power so your builds go a little bit quicker and nothing else is going on it. So gives you a lot of flexibility to set things up the way you want to and manage your resources.
Thank you.
There's a resource quota built into Kubernetes, so each namespace can be limited in what it can consume. And then in OpenShift 3.4, we've introduced a cluster resource quota, such that all the projects that are labeled thusly underneath your user cumulatively can't exceed a certain amount of resource consumption. So you can limit you can limit users, you can limit namespaces, you can limit your whole cluster via some of these things.
Yeah, I didn't. I thought I'd set some limits up on one of these, but apparently I didn't. Yeah, I can't find it. Well, anybody else have any other questions or anything else they want to talk about, bring up, discuss?
I had a question about the routing.
Sure.
So for a service that I would want to be externally available, like outside of the cluster, is there any support for like a dynamic routing, or does every service that I want to be available outside of the cluster, I have to go and manually like set up a route? So what I'm thinking is like, say I bring up a pod with a certain name, have that accessible at a certain subdomain without having to go.
You would never make a pod itself available externally because that pod can die and come back somewhere else at any time.
Well,
So you only expose externally through a route, which exposes to your whole application and all of the pods that would theoretically be in it.
Right.
Still not answering
I
your
don't think
question.
I understand your question.
So my question is, if I have an application with a certain name, like a service, is there any way for me to be able to hit it externally without having to manually set a route for that application? My use case would be like a developer wants to spin up a service and have it be able to hit it externally without setting up the route themselves.
Using like a wildcard DNS, so it would be like my app dot
You would have
magic
to.
route.
You would still have to expose a route for that project that contained the pods you wanted to spin up, and they'd have to go through that.
Yeah, I'm confused on when you say externally.
Outside of the cluster.
So I mean, you can ping the service IP address. Like you're saying, if like a developer wanted to check it, but it doesn't. When I'm thinking when you're saying externally, like I from home can just hit your URL, and I don't think that's what you're talking about.
What I'm saying is that I know like inside of your cluster you have some kind of service discovery, so you don't have to like worry about IP addresses. But say I want to hit my application at some subdomain, so like myapp.company.com, but do I have to always set up a route manually for that specific application, or can I like say bring up an application with a certain name and then just have magically be able to hit that at a
But
certain
then again,
subdomain?
setting up a route is like 2 clicks.
Yeah, if you were doing that, you'd have a template already set up for deploying your whole application that had the route already defined in it, and then you just tell OpenShift to run that template and bootstrap your application, and then it would become available.
Is there
That's
an
actually
API?
that's my
So basically,
That
just
kinda
like a
would-
template with the subdomain of
With your route already, and you can expose multiple routes.
okay. Well, I think that would accomplish what I
I think it would, but I'm not sure that's exactly how you're thinking of it. But you can expose multiple routes, and you can also spin things up from a template you already have configured that will do everything. It'll set up your service automatically, you'll set up your route automatically, and then it will deploy your application. So you just create a template, and then whenever they needed that, they would either make a new project and use that template to spin it all up, or somebody would do that for us from DevOps or whatever.
Okay. I think that would accomplish what
Okay.
I'm saying.
Anything else?
Can you speak a little bit just about troubleshooting issues in this massive system?
Sure. As you saw when we looked through some of the projects and stuff, you can get access to a lot of the logs and a lot of the different things within here just by looking through. So if we want to see our build logs, we can look at the builds, see the environment and all these type of things. So a lot of this is available, and you can get logs pretty easily and see what happened. So here's like events for the build. You can see it pulled the image from the local thing there and all of this. If you really are having more problems with pods and things like that starting to fail, you're going to want to go to the command line. But there is a lot of built-in features, like there's the OC describe command, which allows you to describe basically any resource inside OpenShift, from your images to your pods to your full applications and your projects. You can describe on just about anything, and it'll pull up all of the most recent information about what's been going on in that resource and any logs that might be available. There's also OC logs, which you can point towards resources, and it'll give you detailed information about build process and things like that are going on. I will say one thing about OpenShift is there's a lot of different places to find logs. So it takes a little while to find which one is going to give you the right piece of information for what you need to figure out what's going on. But once you know those locations, there's a lot of information available to you, and it's usually pretty straightforward to figure out what's going on and what's wrong with it and what you might need to do differently to get it to deploy successfully.
Are those logs open that you can aggregate them somewhere? Or do you just have
So there is, and I don't have it deployed correctly in my OpenShift environment. I'd show it to you guys, but you can use Kibana is built into OpenShift, and it'll aggregate all your logs for you. So in that advanced configuration we were talking about, you can set up Kibana, basically turn on logging, and it'll hook into all of your pods, runs on your infra nodes, and monitors all of your pods that run on the nodes, and will aggregate logs across that and allow you to search across them, do SQL queries like it's a database and those type of things to get really detailed logs about what's going on.
That also runs as a container.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it runs a container on all of the nodes that kind of just internally monitors stuff. So that's pretty sweet and easy to set up, though I didn't get it set up in time for this. So sorry, guys.
What version is supported for Kibana?
I'd have to go look and see what I deployed. I think it is. Let me see. It's probably in my host file. So let's see. I tried to deploy 3.3. Yep. So, and it also will automatically deploy for metrics and stuff, and how we got some of those limits and things. It'll deploy Hocular in there as well for automatic metric detection. And you have to enable that if you want to do things like auto scaling and resource limitations, because that's the metrics that OpenShift actually uses to determine when to auto scale. So if you enable metrics, then you can set resource limits on your CPU and your memory and turn on an auto scaler. And as soon as it hits those, it'll start scaling up pods for you automatically. Any more? Awesome.